Thanks for joining our Maestro 10.5 update webinar. So the update on this is that we've done a soft release today, but we are officially launching 10.5 on Tuesday. So all of the documentation, new release, free trial, and all of that will be available on Tuesday, but you're going to get a quick preview here. So let's get started. Before I jump into kind of the details of the 10.5 release, I do kind of want to tell you about our brand new product vision. So the product teams, along with the entire company, have come together to update our product vision, our Maestro product vision. And it is now the most intuitive orchestration tool for DNS, DHCP, and IPAM that adapts with you and your evolving network. So if you're not totally familiar with what a product vision is, this vision acts as Maestro's true north. So every new capability, every new feature, every new improvement that gets, through the roadmap process, right, will correspond with this vision. And so in alignment with this, of course, we're very excited to announce 10.5, which very much correlates with our product vision. It brings more intuitive workflows, proactive and preventative mitigation and troubleshooting, as well as more integrations with DNS partners. So let's go ahead and dive into what does this actually look like. Don't worry, I only have 2 slides. We're kind of gonna wet the palette, show you all what we have to offer, and then I'll jump into the demo and actually show it to you so that you can see it live and in action. So as far as brand new capabilities go, capabilities that haven't existed in Maestro in the past, we now have our Akamai off-serve integration. Say that 5 times fast. So this is the on-premises version of Akamai's DNS service. So we already had Edge DNS integration, if you'll recall, to Akamai Cloud. Now we have Akamai off-serve integration, which is the on-premises DNS. This is a new service agent, and this is fantastic news, right, for Akamai customers, but it's actually fantastic news for everyone because this is the first step that we have taken to be able to more easily onboard new DNS services moving forward. So almost on the fly, within a couple of weeks, with our new service agent, the way that our developers have created it, we're going to be able to onboard new services in about 2 weeks. So this is very exciting news as we talk about adapting with your environment, right? Going back to that product vision of being able to use the most appropriate, the most well-suited services in the cloud and on premises that you need for different modern architectures, whether you're moving to, spine leaf networking on premises, whether you're moving to the cloud or multi-cloud or multi-site, multi-service, or of course, SASE, as we talk more about edge and things like that, that's going to become very important to be able to onboard these services. In good news for Kia DHCP users, we now support Kia client classes if you're using Kia DHCP. Now, a few weeks ago, we actually did a webinar with one of our lead developers on Kia client classes, Cesar. So if you jump on the Men&Mice website, go to DDI Talks, but you'll see that we did a whole webinar just on Kia client classes. But just to put it very succinctly, basically, it's a way to group devices and then, kind of prevent configuration sprawl by automating configuration. So instead of just being able to use, a subnet or a VLAN like we usually do to assign configuration and use DHCP options and all of that, you can actually get a little bit more prescriptive and maybe use vendor class, for example, or type of device, and then assign that to, a boot P server or something like that, right? And I'll show you an example to kind of really hit that home. But again, we have a whole half hour on that, as well as some blogs coming out on that as well. The new and improved features. So going back to kind of the second part of our product vision, or I'm sorry, the first part, making it more intuitive for our users, providing a better experience, we have begun to hit almost 100% parity between the old web console and the new web UI. And we haven't just lift and shifted, right? We've actually reimagined the way that we're doing these things so that it is optimized for especially our daily users, really kind of taking into account what that experience is, what you all are trying to achieve in your jobs, right? Not just doing, you got to create a new DNS zone, but what does that mean for the entire workflow? How are you bringing in new services to go to market, right? All of that larger picture stuff, we've tried to work to optimize those tasks for our users. So service management has been revamped. It's not only been renamed to service management from server management, but we've optimized the experience there. David, I see you have a question. You want to jump in?
I have a question.
Yeah.
The workflow process requires a license additionally or not?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I can see the confusion here. So what I mean by workflow in this case is just a generic term, workflow, the workflow that you go through. But what you're referring to, I think, is the workflow function, the workflow capability in Maestro called workflow. So workflow capability in Maestro does require a license to use. What I'm referring to is literally just kind of the workflow that you follow, the process that you follow in order to do some of these things. So does that clear it up for you?
It's clear for me.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. Sure, sure. We've also, and maybe I should change the workflow word to process in this case, we've optimized the zone creation process. And so now when you go to create a new DNS zone in Maestro, we've made it so that you're only offered the relative options depending on what you're trying to do. So for example, if you're trying to create an Active Directory integrated workflow, you'll get Microsoft options, right? And vice versa for bind, you'll get the ability to add XDNS profiles. I'll walk through that a little bit and what that means, as well as the ability to just go ahead and add custom properties and populate custom properties right there in the wizard, which is very important. If you missed our cloud asset management webinar a few weeks ago, custom properties are very important when it comes to creating a single source of truth. And, I mentioned being able to kind of do things for modern architectures, right? When we start getting into more modern architectures like multi-cloud, like SASE, we need to know where things are, what things exist. Because if we don't know what things exist, we can't do things like secure them. We can't do things like automate them. So having a single source of truth is a fantastic place to start. And of course, every device, everything, every digital property within your environment probably has an IP address and maybe even a DNS name. So what better place to have that single source of truth than your DDI solution? We're also offering a new global object history. I'll kind of show what that looked like before and what that looks like now. Suffice it to say, you can see all of your logs in a really easy way, in a really searchable, filterable way. We have added event hooks to the web UI. So if you're familiar with things like subnet monitoring or what we used to call scheduled scripts and external scripts, I'll show you what that looks like now in the web UI. We now offer the ability to move objects between address spaces. So if you're using address spaces, so maybe you have overlapping IP address schemas, overlapping ranges, maybe due to mergers and acquisitions, or maybe you're doing some sort of multi-tenancy because you have ACI or NSX, any of the above, you might be using address spaces. And now it's really easy to just move objects back and forth between address spaces. We have several other DHCP improvements. This was a big DHCP release, but you can now manage custom DHCP options via the Maestro web UI. You can manage server-to-server failover support for Windows DHCP in the web UI, as well as directly manage DHCP server properties from the web UI. And again, I'm going to show all this in just a few minutes. David, another question?
Yeah, I see that is a really good surprise. The DHC improvement to allows the failover port with the new version, the 10.5, is possible to convert DHCP in a failover scenario. This is true, really?
Yeah, so I can create a new DHCP scope or take a scope that's already been created and then go ahead and, I've created other failover profiles, I guess, for lack of a better word, where, there's a two or more different DHCP servers, Windows DHCP servers, and then I can go ahead and select, whether I want to load balance or how I want to do that, and then add that scope directly to that failover profile. I will show it too if you want to see it live and in action and then have more questions.
Okay, this is fantastic for us. This is fantastic. Thank you.
I'm glad to hear it. That's wonderful. I haven't even shown it yet, and we're already getting accolades. I love it. The other thing we have added to the web UI, which if you've been using the management console, is system settings. So now all of that is available in the web UI. And of course, we've optimized it as well. And again, made it searchable, filterable, really easy to use. And last but not least, you've been asking for it, Maestro update management, the ability to just upgrade Maestro in a really easy way from the web UI all at once if you want, or ad hoc. Any other questions? I'm gonna jump to it right now. You're like, okay, enough, just show me the demo and let me get out of this. So if you're curious and this webinar is going to go through all of these different features and improvements, but we do have just short little snippet videos available too on the website. These will be available on YouTube as of Tuesday as well. Get the free trial. Why not? It takes less than a half hour to install. I actually recommend getting it right now. It's really easy to do, especially if you're just getting started in your test environment. Just throwing that out there for you to see. The other thing I want to mention, if you want to deep dive on Maestro, if you're not familiar with Maestro, if you're new to the idea of it, we were at Tech Field Day last month. If you know about Tech Field Day, we did a really deep dive with me and our CTO Sigfus, so you can see what Maestro looks like. All of our videos are available either at techfieldday.com or on their YouTube channel. Okay, let's dive in. I do have notes, so a little bit of a crutch, but there are so many new features that I had to make sure I wrote them down and got to them all. So we're going to start in my dev lab here, in not my dev lab, in the developers lab, which is always a scary thing to do when you're showing a live demo, but I trust them. So I want to show that auth-serve Akamai integration, right? So in this, you'll also see how service management has changed a little bit. One being that we call it service management now instead of server management, because it is all encompassing of cloud services, of managed DNS services, of on-prem services. So you'll see we also added logos, so it's just pleasant to look at. You can see really easily what services that you're using. We've added the word agent instead of proxy, so you can see which agents are out there, which are being used. You'll see how that comes to play as well. And then of course the state of the service itself. How is it up? Is it running? How does that look? Then to add a service, we've changed that workflow. So now there's just one button. You don't have to go to DNS, you don't have to go to DHCP, all of that. It works better when you're logged in. Okay, that should work now. You'll see that we have one button here. Like I said, add service. Now I can view them all, I can browse them, I can filter them by service type, or I can even search for them as well. Just doing, typing in whatever I want. And you see I typed in A, I can add an auth-serve new service, right? Now with auth-serve, as well as Microsoft and Cisco, we actually only require that you install one agent in your entire environment. So as long as your server, this central server, can communicate with the rest of the auth-serve services, the same as with Microsoft, then you only need to install, update, maintain one agent for your entire environment, and we'll use that agent as a proxy agent to then communicate, Maestro to communicate with all of your auth-serve services. This is where we kind of configure that. Do we want to select an existing agent or add a new one? I'm going to select an existing agent. And now if I just click next, I can give it a name, auth-serve 2, let's say. I would type in my IP address. You'll see the developers are having a little fun with our custom properties here. Hopefully you'll have more descriptive things as opposed to the answer to the life, the universe, and everything. But maybe that's apropos for your environment as well. But then we would just click add. And it's as easy as that to add the auth-serve service, as well as really any other service in Maestro. The other thing I might show real quick is we can edit these services now as well. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to start over, delete. You can just go in and edit that if you want to edit, the name or username, password, all of that good stuff. You can edit that very easily. All right, let's go to my demo environment so I don't have to be nervous anymore. And we'll talk a little bit about Kia client classes. Now, to see what I want to do with Kia client classes, I'll also log into this one. And I'm again under admin service management. And if I go to Kia, I only have one Kia server here, but it's really easy to just see only the Kia services by filtering that out. And then let's say I want to create a new client class or manage my current client classes. You see a couple of use cases here, right? If you have scanners in your manufacturing, your warehouse environment, that might be one use case. If you're using VoIP and you want to assign certain configurations to your collaboration devices, that might be another place that you want to create a client classification. And again, these will be assigned to a DHCP scope. And then when a device logs on to that scope, when a device is assigned to that scope, it will get a certain configuration because of Kia client classes. So let's just take a look at what this looks like. If I edit this, you'll see that this is a custom client class. I'll show you the built-in ones in just a second. Give it a name, a description, and then here's kind of the important part, the expression that we're using. And this is what we use to match, right? So option 60 here, that's a vendor client class. So we know that we're looking for a vendor type here. And then I've assigned it zebra. And this 5 here means, match the first 5 characters. Of course, zebra's 5 characters. Zebra, if you don't know, is a popular scanner brand or device. So zebra it could be Cisco, it could be Juniper, it could be Palo Alto, it could be, whatever devices that you're using in your environment, but it's as easy as creating this expression. And before I kind of show you options and all of that, I want to talk really quickly about this little easy but very important global tick box. So if you were trying to configure Kia client classes via the native Kia servers, I mean, you absolutely can do that, but you would actually have to log on to each individual server in order to do that. Now with Maestro, we've made it much easier. You tick the box, and if I had several Kia servers, it would actually configure it for all of my servers all at once. Or untick the box and you don't have to do that. Now, I don't have any options configured for this, but I could, of course, if I want to do some sort of NTP server or whatever I want to do, I can use these options. Here I have bootp configured, so it tells, which server to use, the server host name. Again, we're having a little fun with HAL 9000, maybe singing Daisy to us, and then the boot file name. So where that configuration file is. Now, all of my Zebra scanners are going to get that same configuration that I've specified in that XML file. David, did you have another question?
Yeah, this global feature is only for the Kia DHCP, or
Yeah.
is also for the Microsoft DHCP servers?
Yeah, I believe this is just for Kia right now. I'll double check on that for you though. That's a good question.
Only for Kia. Yeah, but this feature is really interesting for the global vendor configuration environments like Microsoft DHCP servers, not only on the Kia, but yeah, it's a good stuff. Yeah. Thank you.
Let me double check on that for you too. I may not have given you the right answer, but I'll double check. But it is definitely available in Kia. And yeah, consistency is key. The more we can create consistent environments, the better off we'll be. If I were to create a new one, I could also do things like use the built-in client class types here, just to give you one use case, right? If I wanted to select unknown, maybe I have unknown users or a user that's never logged on to, let's say, my guest wireless scope before, and maybe they then get sent to a different captive portal so I can gather some information and then they're dumped into the network with everyone else. There are obviously just a ton of use cases here. We talk about it a little bit in our webinar. There's a lot of Kia documentation out there as well. This just gives you a little taste of what you can do. You can really get creative with it. It actually reminds me a little bit of endpoint groups in ACI, if anyone's familiar with that. Okay, let's jump to zone creation workflow. We have, like I said, revamped and optimized the way that you create a new DNS zone with Maestro. So you can do this with all of the zones. I'm just going to show the primary zone here, but they've all been optimized to look very similar to what you're going to see here, but obviously with the relevant options for what kind of zone it is. But let's just create demo.maestro.net. Let's say that's our new zone that we want to create. We have an option to do 80 integrated here. So Active Directory integrated. When I tick that box, you'll notice I only get Windows DNS services available to me, obviously, because that's where I'm going to create Active Directory integration. So then if I were to, let's say, select a primary server there and click next, you'll see that I only get Microsoft relevant options, right? And it starts talking about the Active Directory forest, the domain, all of that good stuff. If I just go back a little bit, uncheck AD and integrated, then I can do things like select XDNS. Now, if you're not familiar with XDNS, we have a ton of information out there for you. There's a technical white paper out on our website that'll actually show you how to set it up and why you want to set it up. But just, long story short, it is a way to have multi-service, multi-vendor DNS redundancy, right? So DNS is very redundant. You have primary and secondary, and that's all great. But what happens if the entire Route 53 goes down, right? What do you do? There's literally nothing you can do. It's a black box. You got to wait for it to come back up. Or maybe it's a routing issue, right? That just makes DNS inaccessible. The only way you can prevent downtime for yourself then is to have another service. And maybe that's on premises, or maybe it's over an Azure DNS, or maybe it's just a managed external DNS service provider that you're using. But we make it really easy to set that up. And that's what XDNS is. Like I said, there's tons of information out there. I'm not going to dive into it today, but that is certainly a possibility. And then, of course, we get, all of the options for if we were to choose, I didn't actually choose it. If I were to choose, let's say, a profile, an XDNS profile, I can do custom properties and all sorts of things. But let's go back and finally just choose, let's say, kind of a traditional setup, for lack of a better word. Click next for primary, and then I can choose which secondary servers I want to configure for this particular zone. Now, these are the custom properties I have available because these are the ones I've set up, right? Some of these will be optional, some of these will be required. Again, that's up to you and your environment. What do you want the process to look like? What do you want to make people have to populate in order to get what the new zone that they want, or the new DNS record that they want? That's what custom properties are used for. Again, going back to that single source of truth, having good visibility, maybe even going along lines of cloud asset management. But I can fill out all of this information. I can then select which folder I want it to go to. So of course we have folders and smart folders within Maestro, an easy way to organize all of your information. We'll click next. And now I just can review and click create. Now, of course, we offer saved comments in Maestro. So if you want to say, what you're doing for a demo, it's always great to say, why are you doing something? Oh, sorry, because I did select AD integrated in the beginning. It's expecting an AD integrated zone. But for now, I'm just going to cancel out of that and keep moving along because we only have a few minutes left of this webinar. Moving on to global object history. So in Maestro, you've always had the ability to view history for any object. And this is what it looks like. And it is a really good way to get information on your environment. I always suggest if something goes wrong in your environment, go to recently created, go to recently modified, because if something's gone wrong in your environment, it's probably because something's changed recently. And so if I go to recently modified, I can view the history. I see, well, not a ton of information there because this is probably a brand new test zone, but I can see everything that's happened. I can know when, where, why, who changed it. Now what we're offering under the admin tab, if I go to logging, is this global object history. So it's really easy. I can search, for certain text, kind of going back to comments, right? If I've created an automation workflow and it always gives this particular comment, then I can start searching on that comment, especially if I think the automation workflow is doing something it shouldn't be doing. So all sorts of things that we can search on there. I can search for object type. I can search from a date. We'll go back to March and click search. Now you'll notice over here, we've added this new column header called client. So all of these changes were made via the web app, the web UI. Let's broaden the search to make this a little bit more interesting. And now if I scroll down, you'll see some other clients in there. So you see my REST API, you see the web app. So this means I know, hey, this change, and maybe it was an error or maybe it's a warning, whatever it is, right? Because I can choose event type. This was made by either, an automation task or maybe by the underlying service itself. Someone directly changed something to the underlying service directly in Microsoft, for example, or it's through the web app. And of course, I can see who did it and why, especially if they've left a comment. What's also new, brand new, is that we've given you the ability to view the history of yourself, right? So I'm logged in as administrator right now. I can see all of the changes that I've made, where I've made them, when I've made them. So that's pretty handy. And then of course, if you have permissions, you can do it by other users as well. As long as you have permission to see everything in Maestro, you can just search by user and see what other people have done. Okay, moving on to event hooks. Again, under the admin tab and configuration, if I click on event hooks, now this is brand new to the web UI, but not necessarily new to Maestro. We've just renamed, for example, change events was called external scripts, scheduled events was called scheduled scripts. Subnet monitoring is, pretty similar to what it was in the management console. If I click the cog, this is not where I actually set up the subnet monitoring. I would do that in the networking in the IPAM tab. But this is where I set up, what mail server do I want it to send from? If I'm using SNMP, I can do the community information there. So all of the kind of set up how it works, set up the behavior happens here in this tab. If I go back to event hooks, I can add change events. So if something is changed, let's say in network, I can give it a new script to run on range changes. And let's say I have a PowerShell script that I want to run every time there's a network change. So I can go ahead and add that in. And then scheduled scripts are very similar, or scheduled events, I should say, very similar. I can add a new script to run, enable it every week on Monday at 1 a.m. or whatever I need that to be. Moving between address spaces, and I'm sorry, this is kind of like disjointed because I'm showing you just a bunch of features, but I hope you'll bear with me as I kind of run through just the last few. It's really easy to now just move between address spaces. And actually, let me just show you, if you're not familiar with address spaces, you can find that right here in your user. And again, maybe you're using multi-tenancy, maybe you have overlapping IP ranges because you did some mergers or acquisitions. And so if I just go to address space, I have one other address space called US East here. You'll find this in the admin under configuration as well. So you can see I have two address spaces. Going back then, if I were to choose a range, I can simply go to move to address space, select which address space I want to move it to, and confirm and save. Now, this is telling me that I already have a range over there that coincides. So maybe I don't want to do this. Maybe I've already moved this range over, which I probably have at some point in the demo. But this is an awesome pre-flight check to make sure that you aren't, creating duplicate ranges in the same network space. So we'll go ahead and cancel out of that for now. And we'll move on to custom DHCP options. So this is possible, of course, from the server itself, but now you can do it directly through Maestro. So if I want to, let's say, manage DHCP v4 options, or for DHCP v6, then I can go to custom options and create a new custom option. So I do that by clicking add, give it an ID. We'll say 126. Maybe it's a TFTP server, and I want it to be an IP address. We'll click add. Okay, now I actually have a couple custom options in there. If I go to edit options now and I try to add options, this should be in there, TFTP server. So you can now do that directly through Maestro, which is really nice. You don't have to pop into the native service itself. And of course, this is available for Kia, Microsoft, and ISC as well. Failover support, David, this is for you. We'll go to IPAM. Actually, we'll go to admin and Microsoft first. Yes. Okay. And now we will go to failover management. So there's a new failover management option. And you can see I have a couple of failover relationships defined here. I can add a new relationship if I like. Failover name, we'll call it demo. I can select whether I want it to load balance or do a hot standby. And then, of course, I selected DHCP2 as my primary server. And then I can pick the partner server, of course, and then click next. I can specify, how I want that to divide up, how I want it to load balance. So I want to do an 80-20, 50-50. You can do that via the slider here. Client lead time, switchover interval. Are you using a shared secret message to encrypt that communication? You specify that there. Click next and review and add. Now, you'll notice that the state has not been configured here. There's nothing appearing, right? It doesn't say normal, doesn't say anything. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And now when I go into IPAM and filter by DHCP scopes, and then I can actually click on failover relationships and see, hey, which of my scopes don't have, a failover relationship configured? This is good information to have, and I can get it really quickly. And then I can just click on the meatball menu for one, and then click on the add scope to failover. Oh, I know what's happening, because some of these are Microsoft and some of these are Kia. So I can select multiple Microsoft DHCP scopes and then add scopes to failover, simply select a relationship and confirm. Okay. Well, I selected the wrong information, but it is as easy as that. Let me see if I can get this to, with the right information, maybe we'll select a different. Yeah, we'll troubleshoot that another day, but it is as easy as that, and we can just simply add that failover relationship to the scope itself. With the sake of saving time, though, because I'm already 5 minutes over, I do just want to run you through the last 3 items with, let's say, edit DHCP properties. We'll go to that one quickly. So now you can actually just go ahead and edit the server properties themselves of the DHCP server. So if I were to do that in Microsoft, I can go to edit configuration, and I see kind of the most commonly used properties that I might need to edit of the server itself. If I do the same thing for Kia, you'll see I get some different options here. Properties for V4, for V6, and then I can also edit the raw configuration. The penultimate thing that I'll talk about here are the system settings. So under configuration, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, because if you have used the console, you've seen the system settings before. But what we do have now is the ability to just do a quick filter and, search for settings very easily and quickly. You can view all the settings, right here. You can go by topic. The one new thing I want to point out are for save comments. So you saw me every time I tried to save a configuration, it asked me for a comment. I can turn those off completely. I can make them optional, or I can make them required. If you want to require your users to fill in something there, you can now do that right here via required. Okay, the last thing I'll talk about, again, I think people have been asking about this for a while, the ability to upgrade Maestro itself. So now I can see every component that I have for Maestro, including all of the agents that I might have installed on various servers. If I needed to upgrade these, I can do that right here. The action would be available. And then, of course, you can see available updates. Now, of course, I'm on the most recent version, because it's not even out publicly yet. But that is the last feature I'll talk about today. I know that was fast. Again, this is all available on the website. All of the features you can see here, we'll have it available in the documentation. You'll see all of the release notes. I do always want to make time for questions, though. Does anyone have any questions while I unmute everyone? And David, I will check on whether we have that global tick box for the Microsoft configuration. In fact, I can probably just see. Yeah, I think
I just had a question about high availability. We run our high availability off our Microsoft DHCP servers through a separate IPAM server, Microsoft IPAM server. Are there advantages to running the high availability through Maestro as opposed to just the native Microsoft tools?
So, Brian, let me check on that and just make sure of my answer. Off the top of my head, I'm going to say that the advantage is really just to have a single place to go to check everything and gain that visibility, which you may not have exactly from what you're using currently. So to be able to, like I showed, I can actually see the failover relationship, and if it's been assigned, I can actually, if I were in DHCP containers, I can actually create things, smart folders and things like that, where I can have it actually filter into a particular folder and then maybe trigger something once it's tagged with, it's a new scope maybe, and it hasn't been added to a failover group. Or of course I can use a change event trigger to do that as well. There's kind of a lot of ways to crack that nut. So those kinds of things, when we start talking about automation and security, I think probably are a little bit easier to go through the Maestro API, because if you start using other DHCP services as well, you can use the same workflows because the API is going to be the same. But from the perspective of just pure, high availability, we really just pull that capability in as an overlay. So there's no particular advantage to the high availability itself, to the HA itself, but the things that you can then do, the things that you can automate might be an advantage. Andrew had a question for the upgrades. Is it just the remote agents or Central as well? Yes, it's everything. Central, all of the components for the upgrades. So let me pop back in there and just show that. So you can see Central, the web app, which often are on the same server, and then all of the agents too. Thank you, everyone. As always, feel free to reach out to me. Yeah, go ahead at Lauren@men&mice.com, or reach out, to anyone, support, sales. We'd love to hear from you. Check out our YouTube page. We've got a playlist out there that'll help you deploy Maestro, that'll help you get started with automation. And we hope you enjoy 10.5. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Lauren. Have a nice day. Take care. Thank you all.
too.
Bye-bye. Bye.